Thank you very much. We'll now begin our 5 minutes of questions. The chair recognizes Mr. Palmer from Alabama for 5 minutes.
Thank the chairman. Mr. Reagan, you and my Democratic colleague mentioned the great work of the EPA. I just want to point out that the photograph that he showed and the subsequent cleanup of the Cuyahoga River is indicative of all of our commitment to cleaning up our environment. And we've made remarkable progress. Since 1980, our economy's grown by 791%. Vehicle miles traveled has gone up 113%. Population's increased by 47%, and that's probably not counting the illegals that have crossed our border. Energy consumption's up 29%. But the 6 criteria gases that the EPA tracks have all gone down 60%. And that's your data. One of the things that concerns me is about how you've gone about things and basically taking the lawmaking authority away from Congress. I'm very encouraged by the overturning of the Chevron deference that the Supreme Court did last week because it restores the responsibility for lawmaking and the accountability for lawmaking to Congress where it belongs. But there's another thing that the EPA has been engaged in that concerns me, and that's basically sue and settle. In March of this year, the Inspector General issued a report that found the EPA does not properly store its procurement data, paving the way for fraudulent, collusive behavior with vendors receiving contracts and subcontracts. This prevents the Inspector General from adequately conducting oversight. Are you doing anything to correct this?
We have.
It's a yes or no.
We have, yes.
Okay, good. I'd like to know if you would report to the committee in writing what you've done to correct this, because it's not the first time these questions have been raised about the EPA's potential collusion with friendly outside parties, especially when environmental groups during litigation. It's, as I said, sometimes referred to as sue and settle litigation. So when was the last time the government audited EPA litigation? Have you had an audit?
I'm not quite sure of which specific audit you're referring to, but
litigation.
We welcome all audits.
Well, I would like to know and report to the committee whether or not you've had an audit of EPA involvement in litigation. The Biden administration revoked the Trump administration's policies to publish and notice settlement details and pre-litigation announcements. And I want to know what efforts the EPA has made to reduce the settlement costs using taxpayer dollars. Can you report to that to the committee as well?
Yes, we can report to the progress we've made to evolve that document to provide more transparency, which is what those changes.
But I want to know how much you've spent taxpayer dollars in these settlement cases. And if the government auditors cannot access data to adequately track management of contracts or litigation costs, then what resources are available to Congress and the public to track the taxpayer expenses for these activities? Do you have any response to that in terms of your oversight? Because you should be reporting to Congress with full transparency about your litigation efforts in these sue and settle cases.
I do believe that we are reporting responsibly to Congress. I meet frequently with my Inspector General. We have taken just about all of the recommendations.
Well, your Inspector General, as I said, reported that you do not properly store your procurement data, which paves the way for fraudulent, collusive behavior, and that's one of my big concerns, is that there's been collusive behavior, involvement with these outside groups. I want to move to something else that concerns me too, is the House of Representatives sent 2 letters to the EPA. One was in December of last year, one was April of this year, signed by 22 members respectively, including 10 members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Both the letters raised serious questions about whether the EPA's proposed $2 billion regulation on the lime industry is necessary, given that the EPA's own scientists have determined that the emissions from lime plants are already acceptable with an ample margin of safety. And in September of last year, the House Science Committee held an oversight hearing, and you testified that you think and you said this: I think what we want to do is to ensure that we're meeting the letter of the law with as much flexibility as possible. I think we have to be reasonable, and I think what we want to do is protect public health and ensure that these industries can be productive. How in the world is finalizing a $2 billion regulation providing as much flexibility as possible and being reasonable?
Well, I think if you look at that finalized action, we took into consideration many of the recommendations that industry asked us to.
You know what
to
lime is
also
used for?
protect- To protect
Mr.
health and
Administrator Reagan, do you know what lime is used for?
I absolutely do.
What's it used for?
It can be used for a lot of things.
Yeah, but
especially
what is it
about-
primarily used for in the construction?
You can use lime for agriculture. You can use lime for construction. I mean, there's a lot of
You can't
uses for
make,
lime.
it's a key ingredient in concrete cement.
It's a
which
key
you-
ingredient in a lot of things. It's not just cement.
And you just imposed a $2 billion regulation on it, then all that cost can be passed on to consumers, to increase food prices,
We put
increase.
protective standards in place so that workers and people who are exposed to lime are
But
not
your
unduly-
own administration says that you've determined it's acceptable with an ample margin of safety. That's not reasonable.
It's acceptable in certain instances. I think that's a narrative or a context that I'd love to have this conversation. Maybe we could look at the full breadth of the statement that the scientists are making. I'm very aware of the statements that our scientists are making, and so I think that may be out of context.
Well, I'm very encouraged by the Chevron deference being overturned because it will restore to Congress our lawmaking authority and remove it from
All right.
these agencies. I yield back.
And gentlemen, time's expired. We went a minute over, so the Democrats can have that extra minute at some point. Chair recognizes